What's up, everyone? This is Lucas Ross Sports, and it's time for week number 3 of the 2022 college football season. Upset alert. We have had 2 weeks already of college football. 3 weeks now are now just beginning here this weekend. College football is flying by, but we had some big upsets last week on our college football upset alert last week. You look at those games, Wisconsin and Washington State, that turned out to be an upset. That game was not considered to be an upset, but it did happen. Alabama versus Texas wasn't even close to be considering an upset. But that game, right there, it went either way. And Alabama, I'm just really surprised of how they finished that game out. But, and then also BYU and Baylor, that game considered to be an upset. That happened. And then Stanford versus USC considered to be an upset. But, that game didn't go either way either. So USC took care of business in that game. This week, I think, is going to be wide open. Like I said, the college football season is already off to a great start. And now we are ready for week number 3 of Upset Alert. And like I said, how this video works, I pick 4 games that are most likely not to be considered an upset. Remember, it has to be in double digits to not be considered an upset. And then for the Upset Alert games, I pick 4 games that are most likely to be an upset. They have to be in single digits from 1 through 9. So let's get started here with week number 3 of Upset Alert. We're going to start with the games that are most likely not to be an upset. And that is Georgia versus South Carolina this Saturday at 12 o'clock Eastern on ESPN. This game's in Columbia. South Carolina coming off a loss to Arkansas. Georgia coming off 2 dominant wins to begin the year. And you can see Georgia is favored by 24.5 points. And the over and under is at 54. So this is most likely not to be an upset, but you never know. Like how Alabama played last week against Texas. What if the same thing happens to Georgia? What if they really get caught up in this game against South Carolina? But looking at last week's game for South Carolina against Arkansas, they didn't really perform pretty well. Spencer Rattler is off to a really bad start right now, but I think he'll get better. But you look at Georgia, they are coming off 2 dominant wins against Oregon in that season opener in week number 1. And then they have, of course, that win over Samford. So, I mean, Georgia's off to a really good start. They're pretty much one of the best teams right now in the country. But this game is not most likely to be an upset. And it is a noon game on ESPN. So, but I think Georgia will have a tough time in the first half a little bit. But second half, I think South Carolina will lose their tempo, and I think Georgia will pull away. So that is most likely not to be an upset. Let's go to the second game now, and it's Oklahoma and Nebraska. Oklahoma ranked number 6 in the country. Nebraska off to a 1-2 start. I think this game was potentially going to be on the upset alert list, but after Scott Frost is firing and Nebraska with their 2 losses there, they're pretty much out of it. Nebraska is off to a slow start in the season, and they fired Scott Frost this past Sunday. Oklahoma's off to a pretty good start. They're 2-0. They're coming off a couple big wins, and they're off to a pretty good start. Maybe a Big 12 contender for the college football playoff. This game is on Fox at noon in Lincoln, Nebraska. You see Oklahoma is favored by 11, so not really much of a favorite there, but they're still considered a double-digit favorite, and the over and under is at 67 points. So pretty much the over and under, I think, is predicting that Oklahoma will be a touchdown favorite in this game. And I could see that happening as well with Nebraska with their coaching loss there. But I think this game, won't be even close, to be honest. If I was going to make a prediction, I would predict Oklahoma to win this game. In my offseason as well, I predicted Oklahoma to win this game. So I'm expecting Oklahoma to come out here dominant, but you never know what can happen. We've seen upsets from last week to this week. And this game is on Fox at noon Eastern time. Let's go to the third game now. That's Ole Miss and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech coming off their first loss to Clemson in the season opener. Then they repeat after last week. And Ole Miss is ranked number 20th in the country. Ole Miss has been pretty quiet so far these first 2 games. People are kind of sleeping on this Ole Miss team a little bit. People are not watching them as much as they used to. And Ole Miss and Georgia Tech's game starts at 3:30 p.m. This game is on ABC. This one is in Atlanta. You see Ole Miss is favored by about 16 points, and the over and under is at 65. So they're favoring Ole Miss about a touchdown in this game, which I could see the reason why to be a touchdown, there for Ole Miss. And I think that is kind of reasonable as well for Ole Miss. I just think Ole Miss has the better offense in this game and the better defense. But Georgia Tech, I think they will kind of catch Ole Miss off guard maybe in the first half. Just like I said, you never know when these upsets can happen. When we saw it last week with, all those upsets that happen. And I think Georgia Tech can really hang in there with Ole Miss, but you never know what can happen. But that is the third game that is most likely not to be an upset. Let's go to the last game now, our fourth game here that is most likely not to be an upset. And that is Texas Tech and NC State. And I'm really surprised about this one. This game is at 7 o'clock Eastern. It's on ESPN2. It's at NC State. The over and under is at 55. And you look at NC State, they are a 10-point favorite. Same thing they were against East Carolina. And remember, they almost got beat in that game. It wasn't most likely to be an upset, but it did almost happen. I think it's going to happen the same way this weekend here for this team. Texas Tech is coming off some big couple wins. They beat Houston last week. Could they upset another top 25 team? And looking at this Texas Tech team in the first 2 weeks, they are a Big 12 contender. They are a Big 12, maybe championship contender, but it's early in the year. We don't really know about these teams yet until we get into the month of October. But looking at Texas Tech, I like what this team is doing. And if they beat NC State, just imagine that. If they beat NC State, they could possibly be ranked in the top 25 coming up this Sunday. I mean, that is going to be crazy if they beat them. And Texas Tech starting out 3-0, I don't think that's a big problem. I think it will be a good one for them. And I think Texas Tech has a chance to be a really good team if they start out 3-0 and upset NC State. But I like NC State in this game. Just the home field advantage I think is going to get them the win, but you never know. So let's go to the games now. Those are games now that are most likely not to be an upset, but let's go to the games now that are most likely to be an upset. And we start with this one. It's Penn State versus Auburn. Both of these teams are 2-0. Penn State ranked number 22 in the AP poll. This game is on CBS. It's at Auburn, Alabama. And you see Penn State is favored by a field goal, and the over and under is at 48. So what's really surprising to me is that Penn State is a favorite by a field goal and not Auburn is favored. I think it's just, I think I disagree with this because Auburn has home field advantage, and I thought they would be the favorite in this game. Maybe it's because the Tigers are not ranked. Let's be honest, I think they are a top 25 team, but it's just gonna decide this game right here against Penn State. If they do beat them, they could possibly be a top 25 team. And this is pretty much a revenge game for Auburn from last year. Penn State beat them last year, and it was a lot closer than it was, people were predicting. And this one, it could be even interesting. I think it's going to be even interesting to see what will happen in this game. And I think Auburn has a chance. Auburn has a chance to beat Penn State. But that is my first game that is most likely to be an upset. Let's go to the second game now, and that's BYU and Oregon. Big game here this weekend between Oregon and BYU. BYU coming off that win against Baylor, upsetting them. It wasn't really considered to be an upset, but it was on my upset alert last week. BYU was on my upset alert last week as well. And then Oregon, they're back in the top 25 after losing to Georgia in the first game. And this game is on Fox. It's at 3:30. It's in Oregon. Oregon is favored by 3.5, and you see the over and under is at 58. So pretty much they're favoring Oregon by a field goal in this game. I think this game probably goes into overtime. It really decides who is the better team. But BYU, if they can win this game against Oregon, they are pretty much maybe considered to be a playoff contender. Don't really sleep on this BYU team. They have a veteran team, a veteran experienced team after beating Baylor this past week in Oregon. If they can really come out with a win here, I think it will be really good for them and maybe still keep their Pac-12 championship hopes alive. Let's go to the third game now, and that is Michigan State and Washington. Big game here as well. Big Ten versus Pac-12. Michigan State off to a 2-0 start, and then Washington, they're off to a 2-0 start. This game's at 7:30 p.m. on ABC. And this weekend, there's a lot of games on ABC, some big games. You see Washington is favored by 3.5, and the over and under is at 58. So they're favoring Washington, of course, by a field goal in this game, and I think I agree with that just because of the home field advantage. And I think Michigan State, though, they are a quality team. They're a decent team. They're not going to back down in this game. But like we saw what last week did, I think it's going to be really interesting this week with full of upsets, but you never know what can happen. Michigan State could survive this game. But if I was going to make a prediction on this one, I would predict Washington to win. And like I said, I did predict Washington to defeat Michigan State in my off-season predictions, if you saw that back then. I like what Washington is off to. They're off to a 2-0 start. Even if they lose this game, they are still maybe a Pac-12 championship contender. For Michigan State, if they can come out with a win, it really puts them probably in the top 10. You never know. Let's go to the last game now that is most likely to be an upset. And pretty much this is the biggest game, I think, of the weekend. It's Miami and Texas A&M. Texas A&M was on my upset alert last week. It wasn't considered to be an upset, but it was happening. I meant to put 1-1 for Texas A&M. I meant to put that at 1-1. That's just my mistake. But Miami, they are 2-0, and they're coming off a couple big wins. Texas A&M is 1-1. Like I said, I should have put 1-1 there. And at 9 o'clock Eastern. This one is a late game here. And this is on ESPN. It's at College Station. And you see Texas A&M is a favorite by 5.5 points. And the over and under is at 45.5. So they're favoring Texas A&M in this game, even though they lost to Appalachian State last week. I would favor Miami perhaps maybe by a field goal in this game if I was going to predict this one. I do predict Miami does come out on top. I mean, I did predict Texas A&M to win this game in my offseason predictions. But I like Miami in this game. I like what they're doing so far in the first 2 weeks of the college football season. And my mistake again, I did, meant to put Texas A&M at 1-1. Don't worry about it, but I think, Texas A&M and Miami, it's going to be a big game here. I wish this game was at College Game Day as well, but they're going to Appalachian State, which is kind of weird, but I think Texas A&M does, have a chance to beat Miami in this game. And those are the games that I think are most likely not to be an upset and most likely not to be an upset. So that concludes, my upset alert for week number 3. I meant to put a number 3 there as well. So, that concludes upset alert for week number 3 of the 2022 college football season. Stay tuned here for more on Lucas Ross Sports.